I'm currently at the bar and I've been here just over 18 months now. But I started off at law school in Perth, became an article clerk at Parker & Parker, which is now Freehills. And then after 2 years, I went travelling for 4 years and ended up working in a law firm in Johannesburg, where I stayed, and did a very long-running case. And then I went to Cambridge and did my master's, and I came home nearly 5 years later. And then became a senior associate at Parker's and a partner, and had children, 2 girls, worked part-time for about 15 years, was a partner at Freehills and then left to join Allens, which was part of the Allens Arthur Robinson group, which Parker's had been at, so I sort of went back to Allens. And then 12 years later I set up Clyde Co as a managing partner in Perth. There were 3 partners in Australia when we set it up, and then I moved to the bar 18 months ago.
There's a lot there.
Yes.
Before I came here, I was looking at, you were admitted in 1983.
Yeah.
So that means last year was 35 years since you were admitted.
Thanks.
Yeah, sorry. But, and with all of those things, with all of those things that go on, like, what sustains a career that long?
For me, it was changing all the time. So, after 2 years, I travelled overseas. I worked in a different law firm. I did my master's. I would get bored quite easily. So after a couple of years, I think, what can I do next? And I think the things that have sustained me, besides moving, so after 10 years at Parker's Freehills, I moved to Allens, where I was for another 11 years. I think what sustained me is 2 things. One, changing the sort of work I was doing. So started off doing trade practices litigation, then moved into banking and finance litigation. When I was in South Africa, I was doing M&A, because that's what they thought my experience was from Australia. Ended up doing a long-running civil litigation case, came back here, did more banking and finance litigation, went into insurance. Then when I was at Allens, I was mainly doing mining litigation. So from my perspective, it's changing the sort of specialties that you are in at any particular time. And also, I think that being a lawyer, one of the interesting things for me has been the clients that I've met, the experts that I've worked with, and I've done a lot of professional negligence, so I've really enjoyed learning about other professions, like, you become an expert in their area. When you spend 18 months in court every day learning about toothpaste, you become an expert on your teeth and gums and tartar control, and, I love working with engineers because I learn about their expertise, or doctors. So I've enjoyed that. That's meant that I've sustained my interest in the law, and I think law's always changing, so you're always having to read new legislation or new cases, so that sustains you. And then getting thrown into a new area, like being at the bar now, I'm starting to act for the regulators, plaintiffs, and I've always been the defendant, acting for the defendant, so now I'm working for the other side. So I think that has sustained me, and also changing my work life from being full-time to working part-time when I had children, and having a family to go home to, and having teenage children to focus on as well as your work. Somehow I survived teenage years.
So what do you see as kind of the big difference between being a solicitor and a barrister?
The autonomy, the ability to take time off when you work really hard. You might work 3 weeks straight or a weekend, and then say, well, I've got not much on, I might have a rest today, or go and see the children I haven't seen for a week. But that's sort of the bad thing as well, because you don't have other people to work with, to go next door and ask a question of in case they're on the other side. So I've missed being part of a team, being part of a partnership, or being part of the team that are working on a matter. Some of my solicitors are fantastic. We've become part of a team. Others just say, here you go. And you've got that sort of responsibility and less ability to delegate. But being a partner for so long, I was a partner for 25 years in a law firm, I've sort of got used to the responsibility, making the decisions. So that hasn't been too difficult for me. But I know a lot of people when they go to the bar find, you know, at the end of the day, it's just you and you're the one that's got to stand up or you're the one that's got to give the opinion. And that is quite confronting. But so the main difference, I think, is you're on your own a lot. But I'm at the age where I'm actually enjoying that because, you know, I just say, well, if I'm not busy, I can take a day off and do something else. And the other side of it, the really hard side, is when you take that day off, you're not getting paid. So it's like, you want to take 3 weeks holiday, that's fine, but, you know, you're not going to earn any income.
Very quickly.
Yes. So that's the downside, is that, you know, lack of financial security. You know, can I afford to do this because I'm not going to get a paycheck at the end of every week like I was used to. But yeah, that's all fun. It's great.
Yeah. And so, you know, you're one of these women within the law that has done, you know, as you said, a lot of different things, and, you know, arguably you were the first to do some of them as well. So, you know, rather than just asking, like, what's it like being a woman in the law, because obviously you don't know what it's like to be a man so much.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I do.
You know, what are some of the more interesting experiences you've had, like, as a woman in the law, and how you think that differs?
Well, I remember it really hitting me a couple of times, being in a partner in a big law firm, where you walk into another female partner's office and invariably she would be on the phone to the nanny or the kids. And that never seemed to happen when you walked into a male partner's room. It always seems that that's how it ends up. And the other thing was, quite often, I remember I was going through a very big case and we would have 7 a.m. conference calls, the time differences, and the male partner who was on the conference call with me would say, you know, is that all right? And I'd go, yes. And I'd think he'd be just at home answering the phone and I'd be there making sandwiches, getting the kids breakfast, getting ready for school while I'm on the phone going, yes. And he'd go, is this time all right for you? And I'd go, no. But, you know, it's juggling. So, and then just sometimes it was harder then than I think it is now. I think now if you tell a client, look, I'm sorry, I finish at 3 to pick up the kids. A lot of clients really like that. In fact, one of my biggest fans was a client who said to me, you're a workaholic, you're sending me emails at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I'd say, no. I go home, I work part-time, I go home at 4, maybe. I pick up the kids or, you know, make them dinner, I put them to bed, and then I come back onto the computer. And he said, that's fantastic. That's really fantastic. And he just became my biggest fan. Because until then, I think he just thought I was this, you know, workaholic who just stayed at the office all day. So I think nowadays when you tell people that you work part-time and you've got school commitments or childcare commitments, even the courts accept that now, whereas in my day, people would hide it.
Do you think that's the biggest change, is that now these things are a bit more open?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You would have to, well, in my day when I started, there weren't any female part-time partners. There weren't many female partners. I think there was 2 or 3 in Perth when I started. There definitely weren't any in the big firms. And none of them worked part-time. And
did they have children?
A lot of them didn't, no. So a lot of the very successful women lawyers around Australia who are in their 60s now didn't have children. If you look at our first Prime Minister, our first Foreign Minister, our first judge of the District Court, female judge of the District Court, that's changed. I think you're now seeing women who've got a successful career and a family doing really well, but in those days it just wasn't what you could do because you couldn't work part-time. Annette Schooley just won an award went into the WA Hall of Fame, and she was the first part-time senior associate at Parker & Parker, and that was a huge thing. In fact, she was saying that when she came back from maternity leave and she said she wanted to work part-time, they said, well, you can't be a senior associate anymore. So she had to be an associate for a while before they agreed she could become a senior associate. And then she became a partner part-time. So she was the first one, and that was in the 90s. Yeah, so it's not that long ago. And luckily she blazed the trail for me because I then became a partner and worked part-time.
It's almost like that first person opening the door.
Yeah, and then people see, in fact there was an article recently I read that people actually began, or the partners began to see that most part-timers work almost full-time. They just work a bit more flexibly. And I always used to say, the only thing I do part-time is my billable hours, because everything else you have to do full-time. You can't manage 70 or 80% of your staff. You can't manage 70 or 80% of your clients. You can't go to 70 or 80% of your partners' meetings. So everything else you have to do full-time, you just get a reduced billable hours, and you find that most part-time people were way above their billable hours target. So it just means, I think, that you could say, I'm not coming in till 10 or I'm leaving at 4. But I think that a lot of women just have to find what's the right balance for them. And some women prefer to work full-time, and some women prefer to stop working and then come back later. Some women say, I don't want to work, I want to be home with my children. I think the fantastic thing now is that you can decide what's best for you, what's best for your family, what makes you happier. Some women hate being at home full-time, and some women just can't bear the thought of going back to work in part-time. And I think it's fantastic now that our society allows us that choice, and men are getting on board, which is great.
So, over this long career, like, what has been like your most proud or heartening moment that you've experienced?
I don't know. I think there's been lots, like getting your degree. That's pretty special. Getting admitted is amazing. Becoming a partner. I mean, they're all really fantastic milestones. Setting up Clyde Co, setting up a new firm, starting with just me, senior associate and a secretary, in some offices, and then setting up an office in terms of doing the fit out, employing other partners, employing solicitors, making sure it works and was a viable office. That was a lot of hard work, and I'm really proud of that. Winning some fantastic cases. I've been involved in some pieces of litigation which have gone on for years, and winning those cases has been fantastic. So I don't know. I think probably the most rewarding thing is when the lawyers that used to work for you come up to you and say, you were my mentor and I've now gone and done this. So that's really rewarding to see how many of them will come up and say, oh, Jenny, I'm so pleased that you... And you know what? Most of the time you don't remember the little snippets of advice you gave them, but it's stuck with them.
It's like comments in passing.
Yeah, and they go, you said... And I said, did I? I said, oh, yeah, I agree with that, but I don't remember saying it. But it's, how things that you are told by a mentor just stay with you.
When someone's senior in your organisation.
Yeah. Says... Look, the most important thing you can do when you start as an article clerk is have some runners under your desk so that you can run down to court. Drop the high heels and put the runners on and run to court. If you hadn't told me that, I wouldn't have been able to get that in. But little snippets that you tell people, and they come up to you years later and say, it's fantastic. And you see them progress through their careers. You see them go to the bar, or you see them become a partner. You see them... A couple of them have left the law and gone on to be doctors. Some have gone in-house. A couple of them went off and became journalists and writers. And I just think, wow, there are people that I've maybe had some influence in and who still connect with me. So that is really, really rewarding. Because in my day there were no female mentors. There were just none. And I was just lucky that I had so many amazing males around me. I had most of them had daughters, because they say the greatest feminists are fathers of daughters, and they were all so supportive of me. When I started off as an article clerk, a lot of the male partners supported me. They gave me work, they put me up as a partner, so I've been really lucky to have some fantastic men around me. So obviously very appreciative of that, because it wasn't a case of you could have a female mentor.
There weren't any.
There weren't any. Just didn't happen.
So how do you prepare for these big cases that you take on?
It's just a question of time, and I think that's probably the one thing I've learnt as a lawyer, that a good lawyer and a really good lawyer and an excellent lawyer, it's the time they take to make sure they read all the documents and that they've read all the cases, and there's no substitute for that. No matter how smart you are, if you haven't read the documents and you don't know your case, you're not going to succeed. And that's probably the one difference between law and, or at least being at the bar, and many other professions, is you just can't wing it. There's just no substitute for hard work.
Yeah. And so is that the sort of thing that you wish more lawyers knew? Yes, and also that to do that you have to look after yourself. You have to be fit and healthy and get some sleep. All the things that I tell the young graduates when they start off. And have something else in your life.
Yeah, and it's you won't survive if you just work 24/7, because you will burn out, and it is a marathon. And so you have to look after yourself. You have to have a break, and you have to get some sleep. You have to eat healthily. You have to try and stay fit, because if you don't, you'll just fall by the wayside. People who aren't able to keep up won't survive in the career, and unfortunately that's our career that we have. That's the way that law is. It's not like other professions where you can just clock in and clock off and say, well, I've done my job, because you can go home at 10 o'clock at night and think there are still some cases I haven't looked at. I don't know whether I know all the documents. So you've just got to look after yourself, I think. That's probably the thing I would say to most young lawyers.
So how do you look after yourself? How do you, clear your mind?
I've got a share in a boat, so we spend a lot of time at Rottnest in summer. I've got two beautiful children who keep me sane.
There are lots of parents who argue insane.
Yeah. They've just come out of teenagerhood, so they're actually now a joy. It's so funny, I read an article recently that a lot of women give up working when their kids, especially their girls, are teenagers, because it is a hard time. People think, young babies, and it is hard, but you can sort of almost delegate that. You've got a nanny, or you've got daycare, and they go to school. It's when they're teenagers and they're just getting out there, when you haven't got that control and you can't delegate to a nanny, and they actually want to talk to you, that's a really hard time if you're full-time working. So I've come through that. I've got a dog who makes me get up every morning and go for walks. Do a lot of swimming in summer. So yeah, I think I enjoy the ocean and the beach and
being outside.
Yeah, getting some fresh air.
So you've done all of these really remarkable things in your career.
Yeah, remarkable.
But what's next?
I've got a bed down being at the bar, so I've been here relatively short time. So I'm just still getting used to being at the bar, and I'm looking at taking on some board appointments as well, because I did, when I was a partner at law firms, I did a lot of charity boards, so volunteering on boards, like a school board or a very large charity. So I actually really enjoyed that, and that's quite rewarding. So I'm looking at doing some more of that if I can. I've got to be careful not to conflict with my practice, but it's much easier at the bar than it was especially those large commercial firms where we had a lot of corporate clients. So that's both of those things, bedding down, being at the bar, and just looking at sort of more community involvement, perhaps some directorships.
Yeah.
Enjoying some time off occasionally.